Hi everyone, my name is Erin Elizabeth Wernberg. Thank you so much for choosing to be here with me today. Welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome if you are new here. Today we're talking about how to make peace with our inner critic. So all of us, no matter how old we are, what our background is, what happened to us, all of this, part of the human experience is we all have self-talk. So we all have like this running background noise, this running script that's going on in our mind over and over and over again. And some estimates are that, we have 45,000 up to thoughts a day consciously, right? And then subconscious is like millions and so much more than that. But so consciously we have the self-talk of around 45,000 thoughts a day. And, that can be, it's kind of like when you observe your voice, when you observe your thoughts, when you notice what you're thinking, right? Sometimes by the time we're an adult, it can be so insidious and so sneaky that we're not even aware of it until we start to become aware of it. But we all have an inner critic, and we all have that self-talk. And from that self-talk, typically the inner critic is the loudest and the most dominant, unless we learn to work with that inner critic and learn to pay attention to those thoughts and kind of like rewrite them and shift them. So the inner critic is the part of us that, does a lot of comparing, does a lot of envy, it does a lot of put downs to ourselves. It can make us, it hears one thought and then just kind of runs that and loops that on ourselves. So maybe we doubt ourselves, we don't feel the best about ourselves. It can make us feel small or not good. And so one thing to notice about this inner critic is that it might seem messed up, right, to the logical mind, but our inner critic does this because it's trying to protect ourselves. So most of the time we got a message when we were in childhood, and so a lot of these things from the inner critic, like we get these messages in childhood, which I'll get to in a second, but we get these messages and then we as a child, we don't understand that those are other people's limitations being projected onto us. And so because of that, we internalize that because we think, okay, well, this is, the adult or the authority or this, so they must know what's going on because they're in charge of taking care of me. And then it can just get caught up. And then we think, okay, well, I need to honor that so that I still have my connection to being taken care of. Because again, as children, we can't we can't survive without adults around us to take care of us, right? So the inner critic, sometimes the thoughts can be, and you, as I'm talking, you'll kind of know what resonates for you around this. So just pay attention to that. But it can be thoughts like, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're ugly, no one likes you. Wow, that was so stupid. I can't believe you thought that thought. That's so embarrassing. You need to look this certain way, or you shouldn't be as loud, or you shouldn't be as quiet, or you shouldn't be as this, or you shouldn't be as that. Something's wrong with me. I'm not a good person, right? So it's a lot of this. Any of those can be your like inner critic stories. You probably have more than one, but just focus and tap into yourself and kind of see which one's going on there. And just even from that list I gave, you can see that the inner critic just makes something up, right? So it's not real, because it can tell you in certain times, it can tell one person, right, like you're too loud, and then tell another person, well, you're too quiet. And it can also tell you, like, in this setting you're too loud, but in this other setting you're too quiet. So it's not based on logic, it's just based on falseness, is based on incorrect things. And so again, this inner critic, it just runs these stories to make us feel small, make us feel like this, make us feel whatever. And again, a lot of times this is coming from a place, it seems messed up again, because it is, but it's coming from a place of trying to protect ourselves. And so a lot of times, like, this mean self-talk to keep us small or to keep us whatever is just learned as like a safety self-love thing from when we were children. Like, again, if I act in a pleasing way to these adults around me based on the feedback they're giving me, then I'll continue to be safe and I'll continue to have access to food, shelter, clothes, water, whatever, any and all of that. So it's coming from that place, but again, it never goes away. So we never outgrow it. No matter how much like spiritual work you do, or how much therapy you go to, or how long you've been investing in your relationship with ourselves, the inner critic is just part of the human experience. As I said, it's part of our minds, it's part of what's going on there. And so that's why it's important for us to make peace and learn how to work with the inner critic, instead of feeling like, I need to outgrow this, or I need to, one day, once I do enough work, it's going to go away. And it's not. Okay, so it's about learning to live with it instead of turning it off completely, learning to observe it instead of just accepting what it's saying all the time. So we can definitely learn to quiet it, to correct it, but it doesn't go away. So part of that is we have to learn to reroute it, to say something else in its place, to, we have to just learn to work with it and make peace with it, and not like continue to divulge in it instead of just letting it run rampant. Because part of what the inner critic can do is it can give us a thought that's not true, and then we just get in that shame spiral around it, right? So if you say like, oh, you're so stupid, and they can be like, oh yeah, I'm so stupid for being so stupid, or like, wow, it's like, wow, I'm so stupid. Oh wait, I need to be kinder to myself. Wow, I'm so stupid that I couldn't just be kind to myself, right? So it's very tricky. It has a lot of ways to keep us looped into it. It has a lot of ways to make us feel like we're stuck, make us feel like, we are at the mercy of this thing. But again, we have to learn how to work with it, because for a lot of us, we are not taught how to do that. And so it can feel like, oh, something's wrong with me that I have such bad negative self-talk, or that I have this inner critic. But again, it's just part of the human experience. And if we don't learn how to work with it, to make peace with it, we can try to drown it in addictive behavior. So that can be substance abuse, it can be overworking, it can be food, it can be, like TV, video games. Like there's never silence because you don't like being with your own thoughts. So that's one way of trying to deal with it. We can also try to fight it, or like, that example I gave of getting in the spiral around it. And then what that happens is that's just so exhausting, because again, it doesn't ever go away. And we feel like, well, something's wrong with me, because I should just be able to turn this voice off and make it go away and not think like that and just be nicer to myself. And so it's important for us to remember that, like, if you get stuck in that fighting it and trying to like just make it not be happening, which is impossible, then that can be exhausting, and then again can contribute to that, like, I feel like I'm doing something wrong with all of that. So how do we do this? How do we make peace with our inner critic? So the first thing, like everything in life, is just accepting that it's not going to go away, but it does get better. We have to be intentional with working with it. We have to be intentional with identifying and like being willing to go inward and willing to hold space for ourselves in a loving, kind, and compassionate way. So again, a lot of times, we can identify something in childhood that gave us this message of where the inner critic comes from. So I think the first thing to do is just notice, when are you most hard on yourself, right? And what are the messages that it's saying? So it could be that, like, my inner critic gets really loud when I make a mistake at work, or when I feel like someone in my family or my friends is mad at me, or when I'm getting dressed in the morning and I have to like look at my body, or so just kind of like pay attention to when it gets the loudest, or when it's the most common repeated phrases that you hear from it. And so our inner critic feeds us stories that we've internalized. And so, it could be something that, like I said, someone said directly to us in childhood growing up. It could be a message we got either directly or indirectly from watching TV, from if we grew up in a religion, in society, in school, in media, in any type of authority, any type of messaging or programming we got. We can pick up messages from there about us, right? Like, well, like, oh, well, everyone looks like that, but I don't look like that, so something's wrong with me. Or, no one else gets treated this way except me, so something must be wrong with me. And again, just remembering that, like, adults speak to us from their own limitations a lot of times if they're not committed to their own healing work. And so just recognizing that some of these messages that come to us are, all of them are not our fault, right? So all of it's not your fault. And then some of them, the inner critic just latches onto some and then like continues to repeat them. So once you identify your main ones, or the ones that continue to come up, or the ones you want to start with, right, if it feels overwhelming, it's important to then identify, like, where did this came from? So sometimes it can be like word for word the exact sentence an adult told us when we were younger. So it could be like, wow, you're so stupid, you're never going to do well in school. Or it could be, if you grew up looking a certain way or being a certain whatever, identity, it's like, okay, well, that means you're going to be this thing in the future, right? And so you internalize that message from that. So just identifying, is this like word for word someone said to me? Did I get this message from school, from a teacher, from a religious person up here, from some type of other authority, from a movie, from TV, from a magazine? I mean, the inner critic can pick up anything from anywhere, right? Even just my family dynamic, it doesn't have to be a direct word for word thing someone said to you. And then once you identify those thoughts, it's going to be about like examining that and then either like providing counter evidence to that, or like switching it into a more loving, kind, compassionate thing. So it could be like, I'm so stupid. You'd be like, okay, well, I'm not stupid. Like, I have this job, or I have this college degree, or I figure these things out for myself. So the ego loves evidence, inner critic loves evidence. And so when you can provide counter evidence, that can, it can't, the story can't hold up with itself if you can do that. You can also just identify the thought and then just be like, okay, well, that's actually not even real, right? Sometimes we don't even need counter evidence. It's just like, well, that's not true. That's not, it's again, just observing the thought and knowing that, okay, that doesn't even have to be true because it's not. And so I can just choose to release that right now. And again, remembering and observing that the inner critic, these thoughts aren't real and they're just there, and you can just choose to let them go and say something else instead. And then again, if you want to rewrite or say something different to yourself, you can say like, okay, instead of I'm so stupid, you can say, well, I did the best I could, right? So maybe you made a mistake at work, or you didn't plan something correctly, or something came up that you couldn't control, right? It could be, well, I did the best I could. This situation was out of my control. I'm not responsible for this thing outside of me that I thought I was, or I did the best I could, or, just trying to be more loving and compassionate to yourself. And one way you can gauge, like, if it's a loving or compassionate statement, is just think like, would I say this if you have a child of your own, or if you have children in your life? Like, would I say this to a child? Like, is it very kind, compassionate, and loving? Would I say that to them? Or would I say this to a friend who I love unconditionally? Or would I say it, to just think about someone you love unconditionally, right? If you wouldn't say it to them, then give yourself permission to not say that to yourself. A lot of times our inner critic, we give a pass to say a lot of the things to ourselves that we wouldn't dare say to anyone we love or care about in our own life. And so again, with this inner critic, it's the thoughts don't go away. And a lot of times when the inner critic thoughts are ramped up and you can feel yourself being meaner to yourself than normal, once you've worked on this for a little bit, that can also be like, okay, I need to increase my care with myself. I need to be a little more loving and compassionate to myself, right? A lot of times when we're ignoring ourselves or not giving ourselves the nourishment and love and care we need, that's when the inner critic like really amps up its statements, because we haven't done anything to counter that. Because again, the inner critic doesn't go away, right? It's just something we have to live with, something we have to learn to be kind and compassionate with ourselves about. And so again, making peace with this, making peace with the stories that are going to come up. But again, you get to decide. Just to picture it like this is something that just happens, and then you get to decide if it's true or not. You get to decide how much you invest in believing this is the truth, this is what I have to believe in, this is whatever, right? Telling a new story with that, instead of just letting the inner critic be dominant in every way, shape, and form. Okay, so I hope this served you. If you ever want any more information about me, all that is linked below. Thank you so much for choosing to be here with me today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.